So today I'm going over the engineering notebook, how we're using it and how it's supposed to be used. What you see here is the cover of your engineering notebook. We'll look at the rules that go along with this, also some adaptations we're going to make. I'll also attach the PowerPoints that go with the stuff I'm showing so you can open them up rather than the video if you would like to look at those. So when we're starting with the engineer's notebook, when we open the front page, we have the table of contents, okay, which looks like that. You have the date, you have the page title, and the page number. If the date should be when you dated your thing, so when you're starting with it. The page number, it's up to you how you want to do this. You can put each individual page down, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then if you work on something more than once, you can include that in there. You could also do the date, the page, title, and then either what page you started on. So like this started on page 1. The next thing I worked on started on page 5. Or you could do 1 to 4 here and then 5 on the next one. That is up to you. I don't have rules for that. So whatever you prefer for that. Then we get into the layout of our engineering notebook. So you have our standard page layout. It's quadrilled paper, probably better known as graph paper, which is here. I'll show you as we go through specifically what your notebook looks like as we go through the different rules, and I'll talk about that. All pages are numbered, dated, signed by the designer, signed by a witness, and include a statement of the proprietary nature of your notebook. All right, so there's a place to sign, there's a place to date it. I'll show that on your notebook as well as we go through some of the rules on those. The statement of proprietary nature of a notebook, I'll talk about this a couple times as we're going through this on different things. The idea with the engineering notebook is that you're keeping something that shows a record of your work and that can be used as evidence of that you are the author of the work, that you discovered it when you discovered it. If you're dealing with things like copyright lawsuits or other similar things related to the nature of it and who's has record of it. So that's part of the goal of an engineering notebook. Obviously, that's not how we're using it, but it's to get you in the practice of that. And I'll reference that more as we go through our different best practices for an engineering notebook. So best practices, all work is in pen. Markers that bleed through the paper are not used. That's because we're going to be using both sides of the paper. Pages are sequentially numbered in ink on the top outside edge. Now, in your engineering notebook, there is already a number there, so you don't need to worry about that. But if it's not, you would include it. Notebooks are bound. You cannot add and cannot remove pages. The idea, again, with this is that it's to prove what you've been working on. So you want it in pen so it's not easily changed. You want it bound so that you couldn't add something in later or remove something that you didn't want people to see. That's our best practices. For what we're doing in this class, you're going to be able to use pencil. As we go later in this week and as we're going forward, we're going to do some stuff with sketching. You're going to make mistakes when you're sketching. We don't want you to have to put 1,000 things in there to get it right. So using pencil is okay for that. But when we talk about what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to use pen. We have reasons we're not in our class, but if I ask you, what are you supposed to do in the engineer's notebook? It's use pen. Right? Our class, we're making an exception to that. Some of our other best practices, entries beginning at the top of the page, working left to right and top to bottom, and then do not leave blank space. If there's an extra space, you draw a line, okay, and sign over that. If you're working in a column and you work down and there's space in the right top corner, you can't put anything in there. You've already gone beyond that spot. Okay? So you draw a line through it and you sign it. If you're worried about how much space it's taking up and you want to put another line going the other way, sort of make an X there, that is acceptable. You should not have a bunch of tiny little X's. It should be neat, right? So like you have one line going through it. If you need a second line, then a second line is acceptable, but not anything more than that, right? And you should be signing on that line. Then consider that if you make a mistake, draw a line through it, enter the correct information, and initial the change. Never erase or remove anything. So now again, we're not going to follow that a whole lot because we're allowed to write in pencil. But the idea there is that I know what happened and when it was changed. You're also in the next thing you see supposed to date each entry. So I would also date when I change things. That's not something we're going to have to use a whole lot because pretty much everything we will do will be working on one page per day. So we'll date it at the bottom, which we'll see later, and that will take care of it. Then inserted items are permanently attached. This says glue is preferred. I find that tape for what we're doing generally works better, but you don't want it loose. You want it in there permanently. Right? You also sign your name so that it extends across both the notebook page and the inserted page. This cannot be print. It has to be a signature. Okay? And the idea with that is that as I start on one and sign over to the other, I can't then pull that out, put something else in there, and get my signature to match up perfectly. You will be able to tell that something was moved. All right. So if you look at that picture, it signs over it and they start on one and they go to the other. Right. So it should just flow right onto the thing. Also watch if you're using tape, make sure you don't tape the whole thing before you sign it, because then you're not going to be able to sign over the tape. I've had people do that before. Okay, so make sure if you tape part of it down and then sign it. You probably don't need to tape around the whole thing anyway, but if you're more comfortable doing that, sign before you finish taping. Then sign and date each page before the next page is started. It says a colleague or mentor should corroborate the events and facts on each page and sign as a witness. For us, you just need someone to sign it. Right? Normally in school, I would say have your classmates sign it. You can have someone on the bus sign it. I won't sign it, even if we are in school. But since you're at home, you're probably getting someone at home to sign. If you were doing this as professionally, you want a colleague or mentor so they can understand what you're doing and can back up that it was what was there and that's what you were working on. We're not doing that. We're just getting in practice. So getting someone to sign and witness it is fine. You should also store your notebook in a safe location. So when we look at our notebook, right, we have our place for our title at the top. We have, which I'll talk about. I don't think we talked about it in best practices. We'll talk about that at the end. We have our number that's already there. We have a signature and a date, a witness and a date. Right? So all of that should be filled in along with the page. The continued from, continued on, and team members you can use. It's not part of our best practices, so I'm not making you do it. Both the signature and the witness should have a date. If you're doing this as a professional document, you would want that witness date to be as close to the actual date as possible so that they can back up that you did it when you said you did it. For what we're doing, I'm not concerned about this. That if you forget to get it witnessed and you're getting it witnessed the day before it's due and they put that date, that's fine. You're not going to lose any points for that. Okay. Then, all right, now then we have our engineering notebook sections. So the title page, when we saw, is at the top of your page. That should always be filled out. You should have your table of contents filled out. You have your general chronological entries, right? That's just what you're putting in goes in order. References, business or expert contacts should be in there when you use them. We're not really going to be something we're using in this class. I think Mr. Fishman uses that in POE for a couple things you do, but you would have it in there if that was something that you were doing. You should also always make sure you try to make it as neat as you can. Some of the things in the PowerPoints that I didn't show reference how you're putting things together, and it should be readable because again, you're trying to show what your work is. So you want someone else to be able to understand. Okay? So that is our engineering best practices and how we're going to be using it. I will remind you of a lot of this as we go through the year. And again, those PowerPoints will be up. They also have examples in them and some other information if you want to look at those.